It's like when flashlights go out. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Kent branch of the Ontario Genealogy. This April meeting should be a great interest to everyone. I'm looking forward to listening to the speaker. We have many things that are going on in the Kent branch. The OGS is an organization that does preserving and promoting family history, and it has been doing this for over 50 years. There are over 30 branches and 4 SIGs that are in the OGS umbrella. And this is the website. If you want to go to the OGS website, you can find out lots of information. You can find out when the conference is, how to join and how to become a member. You can also learn what little perks you get from joining the OGS, Ontario Genealogy Society. So there's lots of good things. Kent branch does research in general family history. We have mentoring. We have assistance in helping you in any way through the Chatham-Kent area on how to search for your family members. Someone is in the library from 1 to 5, Tuesday to Saturday, excluding when we don't have volunteers, and then we post that it's not open. And if you're coming from afar, please let us know so that we can possibly get someone to come in on a special day if it's not open, like a Monday. So that's great help. This is our webpage site. We do have a Facebook group, and we're now over 200 people, so it's going strong. And both of these are open to the public, so please come up to the library. We're on the 2nd floor of the Chatham Public Library on Queen Street, and walk straight through the McHugh room and right through into the door. So Donna, she wants to talk a little bit about some of the webinars that she's been streaming in the last little bit.
Want to hold that up for me? Sure. Come over here so I can.
Which way you going?
I don't know. Are we on? Okay. One of the things I've tuned into this year are the webinars. So if you're an OGS member, this is something that you really should be tapping into. It is in the members only, and there's a schedule on the OGS website. And last Tuesday, it was on the everyday life of our ancestors. And you know, we all want to flesh out the names and the dates and find out more about what they wear. And this was Anne Staley, or so, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but she did an absolutely wonderful job of presenting it. And it was a lot of American stuff, but there were some Canadian things and ideas that we could use. And especially there was one that had the converter. So if your ancestor bought flour for 5 cents or whatever it was, you put that in and it tells you how much it would be today. Or you can put in what it was today and you can find out how much it was then. And the other thing was the timelines, putting your ancestor in the context of history, because I mean, history absolutely influenced. My husband, the Irish ancestors that came during the potato famine. If history hadn't influenced their lives, they probably would not have come. And so this is a great. The handouts are wonderful. You just download it and you print it off. And upcoming, the next one is about a family history blog. Maybe not for everybody, but there's ones in July, future-proofing what's going to happen to our genealogy when we're not able to take care of it. And then we have one on Canadian copyright. I mean, they're just absolutely wonderful. And this is part of your membership that you pay for, and you really should be tapping into it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Cindy, do you want to come up and introduce the speaker, please?
There we go.
Where are you?
Thank you. Okay. Our upcoming events that we have booked for you. At our next, let me get myself organized here. At the Essex branch, which is going to be next Monday, we like to promote what's going on in our community and what's happening on our neighboring branches as well. George Pitfield will be speaking about how he woke up one day and discovered he had Native ancestry. So that's at the Windsor Public Library, and it's open to the public just like this meeting is. The Kent Historical Society also holds its meetings here. They have Marty Jarvis, who will be telling stories about and around the neighborhood. So again, it's open to the public. You're welcome to join them as well. Our May meeting, we have a lady coming from the Windsor area, and she'll be speaking on the Victorian celebration of death. She did a presentation at the Essex branch, and I will say it was fantastic and creepy all at the same time. So that's going to be a really good one. Our Kent branch meeting, our June meeting, the last one before summer, is going to be based around the institutional schools that were in Canada, took place in Canada, where they took the Native children and they tried to assimilate them into the Canadian culture. So we have a lady coming to speak about that. Judy brought to our attention that the Grey Dort is going to be having a reunion on May 29th to the 31st. The contact information is there if you're interested. And then as Judy alluded to earlier, conference, Tracks Through Time, is May 29th to the 31st, and that's held in Barrie. And if you have never been to an OGS conference, it's a fantastic opportunity. It's open to the public. It's not just for OGS members. It's well worth your time. Today. That's right. If you're an OGS, if you happen to be an OGS member, there's a discount, and there's also early bird.
To back up a bit, the Grey Dort thing, do you know much about that? Anybody know much?
No, Judy, do you know any more details on it? Just that we were yeah.
Well, because that sounds like something pretty special.
It's the centennial year.
They're going to hold it in Chatham.
Yeah.
Even though it stands from William.
Yeah.
Just across the street,
Smart.
I would assume.
I think I was briefly reading the information you sent, and they're going to have a dinner, I think, and they're having something at the museum, and so.
It's just off the street, the actual.
Yeah. So over Easter, did anybody have any guests? Any family members? Any unexpected family members?
Also about the conference, I printed off some sheets right up front.
Great. Thank you. Okay, you want to go to the next slide, please? Tonight, we have Wayne all the way from the London Middlesex branch, and he's graciously agreed to come and talk to us about his trip to the Ukraine and his own Ukrainian research. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Wayne up. We'll get you to stick your back on. There's the folks at home if you want to say hi to them. Trip on the wire.
Too many things behind my ears, new hearing aids, so. Thanks, Cindy. I've been doing research since the early 80s. I started off on my mother's side of the family, and once we were out in Saskatchewan visiting my dad's brothers on the farm, and they said, well, you got to start working on our Ukrainian side of the family. And I was kind of dreading that because I figured they're going to be worse than Irish, and surprisingly, it wasn't. And okay, so I've been plugging away at that, and then in 2007, my wife and I and 4 of my siblings joined the Toronto Ukrainian Genealogy Group, and we went to Ukraine, and we all visited the homes or the villages that our parents were from, or ancestors were from, and so if we can start. Yeah.
All right, well, wait 1 minute, Wayne. We're
Yeah.
just having a little technical.
No, that never happens, technical problems.
You're on live, it's being so you can talk and click.
Yeah.
But your slide is not being shown.
Okay.
And I get you to stand over here, and maybe you can just
Oh,
tell us a little bit about
right, so
more of.
I started, I guess the first time I started doing research, my mother's side of the family had a family reunion in Saskatchewan. Now, we didn't make it, but my dad did. And a great aunt of mine sent a great big piece of cardboard with her branch of the family on. And she sent that to my sister, and I ended up with it. And of course, it's one of those where they wrote and then start going around the outside, because they didn't have enough paper. I can remember getting letters from my grandmother like that. And we have one from my wife's side of the family where they wrote one way across the page, and then they turned the page sideways, and then wrote across again. But if you didn't have much paper, or paper wasn't available, you had to do what you could. How are we doing here?
Slowly getting it.
Yeah. So
Okay. 9302.
all right. So when I first started talking to the family about doing research, they said, "Well, there's nobody left over in Ukraine," and so we started into doing research.
Good to go.
Oh. All right, so what they gave us, my grandfather, Michael Vizniowski, it was originally Vizniowski in Latin. I'll show you the Cyrillic spelling of it later on when we get to the cemetery. They were told he arrived about 1905. He was married in New York State, came to Canada about 1911. One of the stories said that he came to the States, came to Canada, and then went back to Coes, New York, where his sister's supposed to be living. And if there was a sister there, I've never found her. So they used to work in the coal mines. M&S stands for Manitoba and Saskatchewan Coal Mining Company. And they work in the mines in the wintertime and farm in the summertime. Of course, they wanted to be farmers. He was 16 years old when he came to Canada. And they moved to the Portal area, which is right on the North Dakota Saskatchewan border. So they're right down in the sort of the southeast corner of Saskatchewan. And then eventually my grandfather died quite young. He was 38 years old. He had cancer. And so they farmed and there. Now there was a Oxbow, Saskatchewan history book that was written, and it gave much the same information. There was a picture that we actually ended up finding the original one. And so if you have any relatives that were in the West, it's a good idea to go online and look for history books. And you never know where you're going to find them. I got one from Ottawa. You get them on interlibrary loan. Manitoba or Saskatchewan and Alberta didn't become provinces till 1905. So in 1955, the government encouraged the town, school districts, the local area to write their family history. And they did, of course, family write-ups, and a lot of them would be people doing write-ups that originally settled in that area, or somebody that was quite young when they settled in that area. So this is the one that the family did for our family, and basically it said what we just reiterated before, and so that was the start of what I was going to look, where we start doing research. One of the things we found there, and they thought it was a passport, but it turns out it was a travel document. For them to leave the country, they had to have this travel document, and it was written had two columns, in German and in Polish. And we ended up getting somebody. And so it gives us the basic information, the registration. So Tekla Stangert from Kaprunts, and all won't do well on the Ukrainian names. I never learned to speak Ukrainian at all. My dad and his siblings learned to speak Ukrainian. They didn't learn to speak English until they went to school. And my mother wasn't Ukrainian, so no, it stopped there. So they were from the Tarnopol, Galicia, which was part of Austria at the time. They were in the western part of Ukraine, which was under Austrian rule, which probably helped me so immensely. So it says she was born in 1886, and I've got another slide here that shows you some of the things. And basically she can read and write, and fair hair, and usually, well, this one doesn't give the height. This is my grandfather. He was from this town, Byakorsta or something, and it's near Graboic. Michael Vizniowski, so there you see the spelling, Wiszniowski. Right there. And Graboic was the bigger town. Apparently now the two towns have amalgamated. So they were from the Tarnopol area, and I'll explain that in a minute. Tarnopol is what we'd call a province, and there's also Tarnopol, which would be a township, or I guess. And where are we? So he was born in 1889, and then all the documents and all the information we were getting from the family, I had 2 birth dates for him, and when I eventually got the records, they were both wrong. No, he was, and what the problem I think happened was there was another Michael Vizniowski that was born earlier. He died in the fall of 1888, and then my grandfather was born in the spring of 1889, and of course, you can't waste names, so they used Michael all over again. So my wife at the time worked at an engineering firm where we had a couple Polish engineers working with them. And so they translated part of the document. So basically it's giving you birth date. They were Greek Catholic, medium height, round face, gray eyes. I can't read this much better, but blonde hair. And so they gave a physical description of him. And down here at the bottom, this starts with V. That just means he can't read or write. Okay, so he one of the things that we found there was a handwritten marriage certificate. They were married in Coes, New York, as it turns out. And my dad's oldest brother was born in Coes, New York. And next year they went to Saskatchewan, and that's where the rest of the my dad's sibling, he and the siblings were born. So this was a handwritten marriage certificate. And it also, in there, if you can see it, Michael Vizniowski. He's the filly or son of Anastasia Reimer of Haberwitz, and his father, can't even see, where is it? But so it gave us his father and mother. They called him Jonas or John, and then Tekla Stangert and Michael. Oh, okay, I see how they're doing it. Michael Stangert married Julia Humana, and gives us her parents. So now we're back another generation already from this handwritten thing. And so they were married in the 30th of January, 1910. And my uncle was born in November of 1910. And then next spring, my grandfather went to Saskatchewan. And once he found a place, then he sent for my grandmother and the baby. I said earlier that he died of cancer, and he had this big growth on his face, and you can't really see it in that picture. And he didn't have a passport. He wanted to go to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, to get treatment. And so he had to make this declaration in lieu of that. So that was another document that we had that gave some information on him. And of course, down at the bottom there, they show you see the X, which is his mark, and somebody wrote his name in beside it. But we've never been able to find the original picture, but I guess it came from, and the story is that one spring he went to Rochester, Minnesota, which could go on the train, to Minneapolis. And he got there, and of course, okay, where's your money? Well, he didn't have any money. So he went back home, put his crop in, and when they harvested the crop, he had some money. He went back. Oh, we can't do anything for you now. You should have come sooner. So, which I guess was typical in those days. So when you're looking for information on people from Ukraine, what language was it transliterated from? Ukrainian or Polish. No, the name is a Polish name, but my grandparents spoke Ukrainian, or sort of with a bit of a Polish dialect. There some words were Polish; they sort of intermixed, but you might be strictly Ukraine, or it might be Ukrainian and Russian. But it depends on who did the transliteration. Most of the records that I found were in Latin, but they may have been German priests, so they're using some of the German script, with the S, big S for second letter and things like that. When you're looking for other documents, the nationality of the person writing out the name, and I'll show you some of the spellings that I found that aren't even close to being Vizniowski in some of the census records out in Saskatchewan. And again, the names of the towns changed depending on who won the war that year. Most of Ukraine, the landowners were the Poles. The Poles owned the land, and the Ukrainians were the serfs that worked the land. And then obviously somewhere along the line, one of my Ukrainian ancestors married a Polish fellow, and again, so you're going to get variations in spelling of the name and pronunciations and things like that, which sometimes can make it hard to decipher where they're from. The most important thing is you got to know the town where they're from. Then you can go to Family Search and find out what records are available for it. So different spellings: Michael, Vizniowski, and of course what it's spelled in Cyrillic at the top line there in the right-hand side. That's how our name looks in Cyrillic. So his parents were Jonas or John, or in Russian it would be Ivan Vizniowski, and Anastasia Reimer, also known as Mary, I found in one document. So Tekla, and again, different ways of spelling Tekla, Michael, Stangert, and of course you can see the Cyrillic spelling of Stangert, Helen Himenuk. And sometimes the names of the town, most of the records that I found were from Groboic, but now they actually use Habrovitz as the name of the town. A lot of it, some of them, especially when the Russians were there after the Second World War, the western part of Ukraine, they don't want to have anything to do with Russia, and that's why all this back and forth in these elections, because the West wants to go with Europe, and the east half of the country wants to go with Russia. So until they straighten out the political system, they're going to have problems. And so you might refer to the district as Galicia or Ruthian, which is Ukrainian, or Aleutian in the Austrian. So different ways of spelling Ukraine. I think I got a map here. And then you can go online, and of course you can find the Ukrainian alphabet and the English equivalent of it, and it can help you read. And you can also go to Google Translate. If you have some words, say on a document, especially like headings, you can plug them into Google Translate and tell them to translate into Ukrainian. And if it doesn't come out right, you can try Russian, or you can try Polish, or even Latin, and see. So you can use Google Translate. And I've written letters to people in Ukraine, and it's not good, but they get the gist of what you're saying. What I would do is I would write a letter in English, translate it in Google Translate, so then I'd send a letter with the Ukrainian part first, and then I put the equivalent underneath it. Because right now, the children going to school are learning English because of the internet. No, so it used to be that by the time they got through public school, they were taught Ukrainian, Polish, and Russian, or sometimes German and Russian. But now it seems to be Ukrainian, German, and Polish. But they have to have 3 languages while they're in public school. I applied for and got the death record, which really didn't give me very much information. My uncle obviously filled it out because there was Michael, his name was Michael, and the oldest son was Michael too. So it just said how long they were. 4 years in North Portal, Saskatchewan. They have been in Canada 16 years, and they were from Poland. Didn't know his mother's name, father's name, like that. So that was one document that didn't give me much information at all. This was the actual marriage certificate. Even though I had that handwritten one, I applied to the state of New York, and it was a really faded copy. It's one of those, it was a microfilm carbon copy type thing, and wasn't, but it basically gave me the same information I had from the handwritten one. So that confirmed that. So they got married in Rose, New York. And they had to, fill out an affidavit to get married, saying that they hadn't been married before, and again give the pertinent information. In 1940, the start of the Second World War, the government of Canada did a survey or an inventory, kind of like a census, of all the people in Canada. And I think it cost you about, it was about $50 at the time, but you could apply for this document. And so it's Vizniowski and Mrs. Tessie, again, Tekla, she was known as Tessie, and the oldest sister of mine, her middle name is Tessie, and she just hates it. She'd sooner have been Tekla, but so she was known as Tessie. They lived near Northgate, Saskatchewan. She was 53 when she was born. She's widowed, and of course, it's from Austria, and the place was Turnfile. Now here we have a bunch of German neighbors doing an inventory, because I know the lady whose signature's on the bottom of it. And of course, she was trying to say Tarnopol, because grandma spoke with a very heavy accent. She didn't speak English very well at all. And of course, it was written down as Turnfile. Well, you can look at all the maps you want in the world, and you're not going to find Turnfile anywhere. So she was Austrian, Ukrainian, and the rest of it, they're doing farming and things. So that's a document that sometimes you can look for. Say it is a little expensive, but there's one that didn't give me much information. But it's you got to go everywhere you can. And then finally, the Ellis Island records came online, and this was back in the early 90s, and I think I had dial-up internet then, and I painstakingly went through it. So finally I found the Ellis Island arrival record for my grandmother. So Tekla Stangart, this one they've thrown a Z in there, SZ. She's Austrian or Ruthian, which from Kampuns. And she arrived in February 16th, 1907. She was 20, female. She was single. She came on a ship, Gertie, from Trieste. Now, Trieste is sort of between Italy and Yugoslavia, right up there, in that area there. You can find it on a map. So it turns out she and her father, and I'd known her father came over with her. They both came on the same ship. Eventually he went back because he didn't like it here or whatever. I've never been able to find his Ellis Island record leaving, but I did find him coming. And so this is a summary of the information that's on the Ellis Island record. So her name, her ethnicity, where she resided, date of arrival, age, marital status, and so she was age 20, female singer, region rights, Austrian, Ruthian, from Caboose destination. She was going to Troy, New York. She had a ticket to Troy, paid for the trip herself. She had $18 cash on her. That's her worldly goods, whatever she had in her trunk, and $18. She'd never been in the States before. She was going to this Stefan Majorek. I've never been able to find him in any of the census records there. In Troy, any of the census records they did, there were just too many unknowns. Because it's probably, as I always tell my wife, because she's from Scottish ancestry, the Scottish census taker couldn't figure out all these Ukrainian names. Troy, New York, there was a lot of woolen cotton mills and things like that, and that's where these people went, where their labor in the mills. So she was 5'3" tall, fair complexion, fair hair, blue eyes, and she was born in Caboose. So she was born. So it gives me a good description of what she was like. So that's a picture of the ship. It's kind of hard to see when it's so light. And then this is her father. He was on the same ship in the same column. So Michael, from they left at the same time from the same port. And then this is my grandfather, his record. So he was they were on February 16th, and the ship was the Gertie, and then my grandfather was in March on the ship, the Patrona, because we were originally told that they met on the ship coming over, and of course they came on two different ships from two different ports in 2 different months, so they didn't meet on the ship coming over. But you hear these stories, family stories, and you got to prove or disprove them. And then, okay, so this is a summary of him. He was only 16 years of age. And I think maybe some of the birth certificate incorrect information was kind of to level out their ages, because she was 20 and he was only 16. So he couldn't read or write. He was supposed to be going to Allentown, Pennsylvania, and he didn't have a continuation ticket. He paid for it by himself, and he had $16 on him. Never been in the States before. I haven't been able to find this Elias patch out in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I have no proof that he never ever went to Allentown, Pennsylvania. Of course, Allentown's a coal mining area in Pennsylvania, and of course he ended up in a coal mining area. And what happens sometimes is they meet up with people on the boat or somewhere after they land in Ellis Island, and somebody's raving about going to Saskatchewan, because at that time the federal government had agents in Europe promoting the opening of the West. The railway had been granted all this land, and they were trying to get people to settle in it. So they had agents going over there, and you could come over to Canada for nothing on a CP ship, and then go out and establish a homestead there, and then you had to work so many years for the CP rail to pay for your passage over. So there was a lot of that went on too. And on there was 2 others from Graboic. This Maria Galamond and Jan Reimer. And the Jan Reimer is probably a cousin of some sort, because my grandfather's mother's maiden name was Reimer. Okay, so there's probably a connection there. I haven't established that connection yet. And I've never found them in the States since then, so I don't know what they did. Some of them just disappeared. And then a little later on, the Hamburg records came on. So not only did I get them coming into the States, I get them leaving Europe. So so he left 23rd of February 1907, estimated birth year 1891. He was 16, male, and was on it. Well, this is all in German, but it gives me the information. So, he left on the 23rd of February 1907, and he arrived here on 12th of March 1907. So they're just, what, 3 weeks, I guess. So again, but again, I have never found any records from Trieste for my grandmother and grandfather coming over. So it's a picture of the ship. And looking some more, this Sophie Stangert is my grandmother's sister. And so she came over in 1909. So she came over a couple of years later. Probably grandma wrote back to her. In fact, when I look at I don't know whether I put it in here or not, probably didn't know. When I look at the detail of there and who provided your fare, her sister. So I keep going to my Sophie's grandchildren and wanting to get reimbursed for that fare we provided her to come over here, but they haven't come through yet. So, but yes.
On that passenger list, it said accommodation and the type of ship. What was that? We went back there. The ship type and the accommodation.
Almost to the bottom.
Oh, accommodation. Anybody know German?
Yeah, I think it's a twin deck. Twin deck.
Yeah, they're probably in the bottom.
A twin berth.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Where did you get that?
Online.
But online where?
I'm not sure whether it was on Family Search or not. Or I think maybe it might. I honestly can't remember. It was so long ago now. That. Now, with one of the stories we did hear, there was a sister of my grandfather that came over, and now there's supposedly the story was that my grandfather came over. He was supposed to go to Allentown, Pennsylvania. I don't think he ever did. He went to Saskatchewan, then he went back to Coes, New York, where he had a sister who I don't know. I haven't found her, and there's a possibility there could, because when I found his father's marriage record, the first child I found in the marriage was 10 years. They were married in 1875. The first birth I found was 1885, but he was in the Austrian army. So, and if the army unit was big enough, they had their own priest. But then from 1885 on, so when my grandfather was born, well, a couple of children after him, no, they were all, the birth records were all there in that town. So after he got out of the army, he went back home, and that's where the family grew up. So this sister didn't come over to 1920. And we're always told about when she married a George Home. And of course, they wanted me to track him down. My one aunt was in the Canadian Army in the Second World War, and she was down in New York, and she looked in the phone book, and there was too many George Home, so she didn't bother looking anymore. I have found them, I've written to them, and I even found an email address once, but they've never replied. But the power of Google, I put in her husband's name was George Home, and then he had a son Leonard. So I put in Google search and had Google, anytime they find Leonard, an article with Leonard Home, they would send me a link to it. Well, his son, Leonard's son, was also Leonard. He's 54, he's single. And last fall or summer, anyway, there's this newspaper article come up for Long Island, and this guy, I think he might be a bit of a pothead, because he pulled up in front of his mother's house, and coming to a stop, and all of a sudden his pickup truck accelerated and went in and took the corner of her house off. Police didn't lay any charges, so I had that article there. So, of course, one of the things we always like and look for are census records. And again, the 1910 Coes, New York, no chance of finding them there. Just, my brother and I bought the CD for the 1910 census before they came on Ancestry and Family Search. And we went through there, and we went up and down the street. We know, what street they were supposed to live on, and just unknown. And again, 1911 census in Saskatchewan. Not sure, I haven't found any border crossing records for my grandfather when they went into Saskatchewan. Haven't found them yet at all. Now, 1960 census, I finally found them, but you notice I didn't find him by searching Vizniowski, Michael Vizniowski. And again, it's probably, and he was a Scottish census taker. He was a Mick. Mick somebody, I can't remember his name, but of course, probably his grandma was at home, and Vizniowski, and he thought he said Mishkowski. Male, married, age 28, estimated birth year 1888, which is not right. From Galicia, and that's where they lived in Saskatchewan. Assiniboia, again, Saskatchewan before 1905 was known as Assiniboia. And again, it was 1960 census. It was Ruthian. There's one here. For ethnicity, they put Chinese. So you don't know what you're going to find. And so, okay, this is the 16 continued. So you list them. So this is the first one. No, John. Okay, my dad was born in 17, so he's not in the census yet. And I've always heard this James Zulu. I've heard my dad talking about that name, and obviously, he was a friend of the family, and he was actually boarding with them on the farm. But I don't know whether he's in any family connection or not. I've just always heard this name. In the 1921 census, so again, Mike Minovsky, male. And the only way I could find him is I had to go through page by page. Now, fortunately, that census district, I know exactly where they lived, so I can just go to that census group. There was only 30 pages or something like that, so it wasn't a hard thing to go through and find them. And of course, the spouse's name's Siggy or Singy. No, somehow Tekla became that. Austrian, Raider, tribal origin, Chinese. I guess it was Greek to them. So of course, we never run into these problems at all with name spellings. So when you're dealing with, Ukrainian, Polish, and any other names, Slavic names, or you're going to always run into problems like that. And then, of course, this is the first census that my dad appears in, or the only census that he appears in so far is 1921. And again, they got his right. And then my grandmother, Aunt Nell, which we know her as, but her name was Nathalie. Yeah. So you always run into those type of things. Now, with those documents, then now we got to start looking for, the name of the place. So there's a website, Polish Roots and Galician Town Locator Search. So again, and you're going to run into like Graboic. There's about 4 or 5 different towns of Graboic that are in Ukraine and Poland. So you got to make sure you get into the right district. A guide the Jewish communities. Again, the Jewish organizations are doing a lot of transcribing of records. Again, the Jewish people lived in the same towns as your Ukrainian or Polish or whatever relatives. So look on the Jewish Gen website, for names and things like that, because you just don't know. And it could be that Jewish people married Ukrainians and vice versa. Whoops, we're still on. Again, so again, it gives you all the different spelling of Grabovitz, and it tells exactly where it is and things like that. And then Kapuch down on the lower side. And then there's this fellow out in Manitoba named Brian Linus. He's been producing his genealogy, Gazetteer of Galicia. He's been working on it for years, and again, I got a copy of it, and if anybody's ever looking for Ukrainian names, you get me. So again, you go through, and it tells you the administration district, the judicial district, and where the Roman Catholic parish was, where the Greek Catholic parish was, and sometimes even where the Jewish parish was. And remember that, in the town where Grandpa was from, there was a Roman Catholic church there, and there was a Greek Catholic church there. And Roman Catholics married Greek Catholics and vice versa. So you might have to look at both records. And so he's done a lot of work on researching this. Again, a lot of Ukrainians out in Manitoba, so I guess he must have some Ukrainian background. Then the Lusker or whatever, so the administration district of Tarnopol and the judicial district, which was Mukulins, which is kind of a little bit south of there. Now, before World War I, this is basically what it looked like. We had Germany, we had the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and then the Russian Empire. And of course, because Tarnopol just makes it in to the Austrian, which helped preserve the records and got things going a little easier for us when it comes to doing it. I've never done any research in the eastern part of Ukraine, so I'm not really familiar with that. But even I have seen some records from Kiev that are on the family history site. So between the wars, and then Poland takes over the area that was Ukraine. Okay, and again, it was Polish. For part of the time, Poland disappeared for over 100 years. It was part of the Russian Empire, and Germany took some of it too. And so then we're back, and it's back to Poland between the wars. And then so today we have Ukraine and Belarus and things like that. And I know friends of mine in London, her family is Ukrainian, but one of her parents was from Odessa and the other one was from Belarus. And again, Putin's got his eye on Belarus too, so. This is the region of Ukraine, and we have Ternopil up here. And these are what we call the oblasts or provinces of Ukraine. So we have Ternopil, the city, in Ternopil, the oblast. And then within the oblast, so there's Ternopil Oblast, and then within there, we have the counties. So this is the Ternopil Oblast, and so we got the Ternopil, rayon, go back, where Grandpa was from, and then the Kosovo rayon is where Grandma was from. They're both one sort of 15 kilometers southeast of Ternopil, and the other's 15 kilometers southwest of Ternopil. I don't think they knew each other, before they left the Ukraine. So you got to sort of keep that in mind. Actually, when I put down their birth, I put them down as being from, Galicia, Austria, or Ternopil, Galicia, Austria. Another map that on the website's not coming out very good, but I'll make sure Cindy gets this. This is a map of Europe that was produced in 1910. And if I click on the little rectangle, rectangle with that line points to, if it's in the right spot, one of the problems we ran into is I do my PowerPoint on one program and they transferred over to another. So sometimes some of the things didn't come out quite right. But if you click on that, it opens up into this. And you can actually, see the rivers and creeks and the roads and everything. It's a very detailed map. And it's the name of the towns as they existed in 1910 for pretty well all that part of Europe and Eastern Europe. And I'll make sure that, we get that's one of my favorite maps. Yeah, okay, that's right. She's got it on the PowerPoint. So here's more detail. So this is, so Kapoots over here, that's where the town where Grandma was from. And this is the sort of the, like Chatham is to Chatham, Kent, And when we were there, it's a really beautiful spot. There's a valley there and a stream running through it. And apparently they told us when we were there that the Germans were on one side and the Russians were on the other side and just bombing the heck out of each other. But you get a pretty detailed map. And then we have, this is actually this heavy line is the railway going through. So they didn't have very far to go to get the railway. And then this is where Grandpa was from, Graboic, and here's he actually was living in this little town. These are all one town now. They've been amalgamated, much like they've done around here. All right, a little bit of background. The Galicia records, the Austrian government, they're in the archives. They started in 1778, and the Austrian government said that the Catholic Church was the official keeper of the records, the state records. And they're in Latin, a set format, so they have nice things. They have the date, usually the house that the people lived in, the house number, who the midwife was, the name of the child, and then the parents' names. And because so many of the kids had saint names, Mary and John, and in the town, that they also had to list the grandparents. Okay, which is a real bonus, and which we don't get around here at all. And again, the diocese was to keep copy of records, and after 75 years, they go to the archives in Lviv at the Bernardine Monastery, and we were actually there in the monastery. And apparently, I've heard they have 12 kilometers of shelf records for Galicia. And Kiev holds the records usually in Russian. So again, as I said, the Oblast, it's the province. Some of them, they have some records. We didn't get much there, but we did go into ones. And the Rayon County Registry Office. Again, they were supposed to go to the archives after 75 years. One of the fellows that was with us on the trip could never find any of the records in the microfilms that the Latter-day Saints had done. And it turns out when he went to the church, they weren't done because they never left the church, even though they were over 75 years old. So that some of the records were still in the church. again, very bureaucratic. When we went to this, the Lviv archives, you go up these creaky old stairs that the priests would have done years ago. We get up there, and of course, we got to write a letter requesting permission to go in. And they had been contacted ahead of time because they had all the books pulled that we all wanted. They were there, and they had books, 150 years old. They didn't worry about white gloves or anything like that. You just open them up and you go through them. But so we had to write this letter. So we had one lady with us that could write the letter. So she wrote the letter, and then we just had to duplicate it, and we all signed it. And then when we go in, apparently they had a theft a couple years before, and so they're really clamping down. So then they had a security guard there. We had to put our camera, and you can only take note paper and a pencil with you, and you had to leave your passport there. And when you got inside there, you got work, and then they come around. They had this other form they wanted us to fill out. Want to know our education, what we're researching, and things like that, and a copy of they wanted our passport number. Well, it's out there, so they had to scramble around and figure out how they're going to do that and anything. So it was a lot of bureaucracy to go in and get to look at the records. And then, of course, they charge you whether you want to photocopy it or you want to Xerox it. Photocopying was taking a picture with your camera, which they charge you for, even though you're taking it with your camera. And then Xeroxing it, they would, okay, you leave the book with us and come at the end of the day and we'll charge it. And it was quite expensive. I didn't really find anything new. Of course, I had the advantage. There was 6 of us going through records, but it was all records that I had already seen, through the Latter-day Saints. So didn't really discover anything new. FamilySearch.org, again, good place to start looking for the Ukrainian place names. Of course, forget about standard Family Search Labs. That doesn't exist anymore. And if you do a search for places in Ukraine, or in Austria rather, so you search Austria, Galicia, and they'll give you a title. Then you click on View Place Names, and then it comes up with an alphabetical list of all the records that they have in Galicia. So you notice there's a few Gruboics in here. And of course, the one we want is the one where the records are from Mykonos. And then it's unfortunate some of it's off, but this gives you a list of all the records are there. So you deaths 1860 and the different film numbers. So I just ended up ordering all the film numbers for the records were there, and started looking through them. And they come in. In fact, some are still on permanent. I just put them on permanent loan at the Family History Center. And I haven't been back for a long while looking at them, but they're there. So you can see what records are there for the time period, and then just order the films in. Eventually, you may be able to. They may not ever be indexed unless they can find somebody to index. But eventually, they'll get the films so that you can actually look at the films at home. Now, depending on the Freedom of Information rules, Austria is tough. Ukraine not so. But they may have caveats like you can only look at the records at the Family History Center. There were some records I was telling you that my great-grandfather was married in 1875. I found that in the records, but the first child wasn't born to 1885. And I knew he was in the Army because in his marriage record he said what regiment and everything he was with. So then I went to Salt Lake City a year ago last February, and I knew what films that these records were on, so I went over to the desk and had them bring them down from the vault. Well, they would bring one microfilm down, but they wouldn't bring the other one because it had records on that were too new. And their agreement with the Austrian government is that those can't be made available, even though they allowed them to microfilm. So, but they're really quite accommodating there. So this is what a record looks like. No, the headings across the top are pretty standard. So you forget which one. It's hard. So Jonas Vizniowski, and of course, Vizniowski is a pretty easy name to pick out when you're going through the records. Okay. So it was typically that, and all this is just the far end of it. Not only, so the first one to say whether they were Catholic or Protestant, male, female. This was a marriage, so usually give the age and the witnesses, and then where they were from. And usually they'll tell you if they're the farmer, they'll say agricola or whatever. No, for it. So gives you quite a bit of detail. So this is my grandfather's birth. So Michael, and this was the midwife. Okay, they lived in house 114. And also, once you get going through them, you realize your people are living in certain houses. So you can kind of look for those houses first, and then check the names. And so his father was Jonas Vizniowski, and okay, I just forgot. Yeah, Andre, Jalowicki, that was his grandfather, and then her name was Marie. And I'm looking at Czech Republic records. And again, the Czech Republic was part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and they're laid out in exactly the same format. And so this is the death of the first Michael. So he was age 2 over in the parts at 2 annum. Okay, so he was Catholic, male, 2 years old. My great-grandfather and one of his daughters died within a day or so of each other. Well, birth of my grand. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, did I go there? And it actually mentioned that they died of cholera. And I was just talking to Dennis Mulligan recently, and he's doing some research for a lady out in California who's done a lot of research, Fitzpatrick. I can't remember her first name. And she's determined that there was a fungus that affected crops in the low-lying areas. And a lot of people died from that, and they called it cholera. When I was going through the Czech records back there, the same time period, I found a whole bunch of deaths listed as cholera. So this fungus or whatever got on the crops, went through and caused a lot of death. No, this is the deaths here of my great-grandfather and his daughter. And another death record. But again, Maria, the wife of Andrei Vizniowski, Agricola, so he's a farmer in Graboic. House number 70. She was 50 years old. Again, one of the things I had trouble in my grandmother's site or town, there was no records listed for them. There was one small block from 1860 to 1865, and there was no reference to any of them there. So what I did is went to this Jewish Gen website. They did a search of all the parishes within 10 kilometers of where she lived. And then I looked at all the records in there, and in case they had temporarily moved or something happened to the church and that. So it's something you might have to consider too, is that the record might be in another parish somewhere. But again, I looked at lots of records, but I struck out on then when we went to Ukraine, we found out that the place was destroyed. Lots of good information on this site, Toronto Ukrainian Users Group. Lots of things about research, and there's actually some of the records. If you ever go to Toronto very often, you want to do some Ukrainian research, the public library, or the Latter-day Saints library there, these guys have got a lot of the records, or a lot of the films, on permanent loan there. So if you happen to be in Toronto and want to go to Latter-day Saints there, you may be able to look at the films without waiting for them to come in from Salt Lake City. So it's an excellent site. He's put a lot of good information on there. So here's, I don't know why I threw this other map in. So again, it's Ukraine. Again, oh, okay, I guess when we went over, so in 2007, we went over to Ukraine. We flew into Lviv, which was originally called Lemberg, when part of Germany. And we went down to Ivano-Frankovitz. So we went to the archives here. Then we went down to Ivano-Frankovitz, where a couple of people were doing some research. One of the fellows actually was in the house that his father had grew up in. And the people were renovating. And when they started tearing some of the walls apart, they found some documents there. And it turns out his father was in sort of the equivalent of the Boy Scouts at the time. But I guess when the Russians and Germans were coming in, they didn't want any of these papers to be, lying around. So they hid him in the wall. And he actually they gave him the papers, that they found there, the information on his first dad. And we didn't have any research there, so we did a tour around there, and then we went up to Ternopil. And again, that's where we had made arrangements for a van and with a driver and an interpreter to take it to these two types. Then after that, we took an overnight train to Kiev, and then we flew home from Kiev. So just a few pictures. Lviv, it's kind of like Prague. In the Second World War, when Hitler was in both of these cities, he didn't want any destruction around them, so they didn't do any bombing of those two cities. And again, they're both designated World Heritage sites. One of the few sites that hadn't, few cities that haven't been rebuilt in Europe. This is us in front of the archives. Those are all myself and my siblings, except the lady in the middle. She's a professor at York University who speaks Ukrainian, Russian, Polish, and German. Very handy to have, especially when we're going out for dinner. And one of the things that we had there was Greek salad, have a Greek salad. So they ended up telling just order a Gretzky salad, like the hockey player. And we ate all kinds of borscht, and we never had two the same. Everybody had their own recipe and way of doing it. So then we end up going to the two towns. So this is Grandma's village, and the interpreter is the second fella in, and we were at the cemetery looking for stones, and they had these nice plots, very nicely neat and looked after, but the brambles between each plot, you had to fight your way through it. Nobody looked after anything in between. You looked after your own family plot, and that was it. So we were there, and we saw this fella. He had his two cows on chains. Well, everybody in town has a barn, and they have their cows and pigs or whatever, but they don't have any place to pasture. They got a vegetable garden. So they would take the cows out on a chain and let them graze along the road allowance or to one of the abandoned collective farms along the way. So we went over there, and he says, okay, you don't need standards in town. He said, just a minute. So he pounds a stake in and ties his cow up. He says, follow me, 100 meters down the road. Well, we walked about a quarter mile down the road. Kind of glad to walk. And so he goes into this house, and he comes out, and he's talking to this lady, the one in the right-hand side there in the pink. And she starts talking about, she was going 100 miles a minute, and so he said, well, just a minute, but apparently she remembers her dad getting a letter from Dimitra saying that, no, you're better off staying in Ukraine because things are really rough here. Well, Dimitra was my grandmother's youngest brother. He came over in 1926 after he served in the Polish army. And of course, now we're into the Depression. So things were rough out west. And so he wrote this letter to tell him to stay there. And of course, things got better here and not so there. But next thing you know, we get invited in, and they're putting this feast down in front of us. And we got homemade hooch. The good stuff. A good thing we had a driver that day. But my sister and my wife, they got wine here. So, and again, so this was the family. And she brought out a bottle and put it on the table. And of course, you have a drink and toast them. And then he was out with his cows out the other part of town. So they sent the grandkids out on the bikes to get him. And he come back in. Of course, he comes in with his bottle. Of course, you got to have another drink. And, it's no sipping. You just, throw it back. And this was two other grandchildren. The son wasn't there at the time, but Helena did send us a picture of her son when he got married. She's since passed away. She was writing back and forth to me, and but she's since passed away. She had a cushion there with this embroidery on, and my sister, I said, can we take a picture of it? No, like this. She says, oh yeah. And the next thing you know, she's fumbling around the drawers, and then she pulls out a pillowcase for each of us. The stuff she had done. So that's, and of course, no messing around. There's facilities there. And then we went over to her sister's place. Well, next thing you know, inside we got to go again, and more food, more drink. Yeah. So this is their garden out the back there. And this was her family, and of course, they got telling us, the oldest son on the right there, you should have come in August. He's getting married, and that's a 3-day celebration. The daughter on the left side. So this is Helena and Olga, her sister, and then I think the daughter's Olga too. Well, she was so excited because she had been to see the gypsies 2 months before, and the gypsies told her that she was going to have world visitors. So gypsies, they can walk on water as far as she's concerned, because these world visitors came from North America. But they even had a tractor there. So that was the bunch of us. This is the valley just down the road, and horses were down there grazing. They had them hobbled, so they couldn't run very far. And apparently, on one side of this valley was the Germans, the other side was the Russians when they were fighting. And then they took us up the lane and into this empty sort of field here, and that's where my great-grandparents' house once stood, but it got bombed out. And we found out after from Olga, it took her 6 months to write a letter to tell me that her sister Helena had passed away. And then she mentioned in there that my grandparents had been murdered. No details or anything like that. And that they were buried at the house there. And when the house was bombed in the Second World War, they reinterred them up in the cemetery up in the town. And then this was a house next door that apparently a sister of my great-grandfather lived in. Apparently during the war, she was sent to Germany, worked for some German people, and then after the war come back and lived in this house until she died. She never married. So that was the house. Of course, there's the well there, communal well. And this is her mother's graveyard. And during the Second World War, her dad was sent to Lithuania, and they never saw him again. And her older brother was sent to Siberia, and they never saw him again. And I applied through Red Cross's Family Finder service, and 3 years ago, and I got a call, maybe a month ago, saying that they couldn't find him. You know, they went through Red Shield or whatever it's called, the equivalent of Red Cross over there, and no record of them at all. Either Lithuania or Siberia. And traveling over to the other town there was a field of poppies. Apparently they didn't plant them. They always come up to a nice even rows for some reason. But to be fair, there they use a lot of poppy seed in their baking and things like that. So this was Grandpa's village. You can see Ternopil is 16 kilometers and Lviv is 130 kilometers away. So this is the valley there, and no, really quite a pretty spot. You wonder why they left, but again, if they wanted land, they keep dividing the lands up as people die off and divide up between the sons, and there's not much land left for them to work. So it's much like southwestern Ontario. Well, maybe not so much this area, but there's a few hills down there. And again, we met these two ladies in the cemetery, and I wrote to one for a while, but then when I sent her some money to thank her for what she had done, haven't heard from her since. So again, this was a marker that was on its side, but that's Vizniowski and Cyrillic. I forget who. Yeah, so there was apparently they told us that the two prominent names in the city in the town was Vizniowski and Reimer. And it's apparently a lot of them are supposed to have gone to Poland. And there's some I can find the names in North America, but I've never been able to tie in. There was one fellow that, again, this is one of our family. I just forget where it fits in right now. I guess there was a fellow Vizniowski that went to Chicago, and when he died, he sent some money back there, and they built this building, and they up on the top there. No, it's a plaque in memory of him. And apparently it started out as a cafe, and then it was a sort of a community center. Now it's kind of abandoned. But he sent this money back, to help the people. Again, I've never been able to figure out where he fits into it. Because a lot of the records, when I was looking at it, by the time you get up to the 1890s, then the records were petering out. This is the church there. Now, I don't think this church was built in 988, but that's when the Greek Catholic religion started in 988. So they're celebrating 100 years or 1,000 years of Greek Catholic. Then we found a Vizniowski, the fellow with no shirt on there, and they didn't know what to do with us because his wife had gone to Ternopil for the day, and of course he's the outside guy and she's the inside guy. So his buddy over on the right-hand side, he came over. They pulled up in this old Lada car, him and his grandson, I guess. So the next thing we're going over to their place. So there's a farmhouse there, and on the side of this farmhouse is this bit of a building there. And, you see the brickwork, and you wonder why it's so rough. But if you look on the side there, you can see they're plastering it. Everything's plastered, there. So it was sort of a little bit of a store there. I guess they sold goods to the people in the village. And again, round the back, and of course we had chicken noodle soup, and of course the piece de resistance is this sallow. Anybody know what sallow is? Fat. But they were really proud because they had fresh garlic you could eat it with. And then lots of vodka to choke it down. We were telling this to my daughter-in-law, and her family's Hungarian, and of course they got another name for it, but she knew what it was. And here, I guess I think the girls end up drinking brandy or something, but no, we had the good homemade stuff. Oh, wrong one. So this was the group there, and if you look at, there's my brother, and you look at this fellow there, I don't know, if you're in a tannery, you think those two hides look awful lot alike. But again, he didn't know, and again, his records didn't go back, far enough, and he couldn't tell anything. So this is the Opera Hotel we stayed in Lviv. Here, people bought a new car, so the priest was blessing it. Yeah. This is the Ternopil train station where we got on and took the overnight train. Again, this is not the train station that my grandparents would have left from because it was completely destroyed in the Second World War and it was rebuilt. There's actually a section of Ternopil that they call Canada because there's a whole lot of Ukrainians that had come to Canada and went back there and they settled in this one area of Ternopil. Again, you don't have to watch for cars on the street. You got to watch on the sidewalk where they park. And we actually saw one license plate there with Montana or something licensed, a pickup truck with a Montana license plate on it. This is Independence Square, where the Orange Revolution, again, we were there just after the Orange Revolution. Whose pub? O'Brien Pub. It's the O'Brien Pub. This is the Museum of History. We went there one day and it was closed there. This is in front of a linden tree that's 1,000 years old. You can't see it. Linden. Between, underneath there, there's a steel beam that comes down that's kind of helped bracing it. And one of the markets along the side of the street, people selling goods. A lot of it was Russian stuff, but and again, after the Iron Curtain come down, then they put up a memorial to Stalin's starving of the Ukrainians, especially in eastern Ukraine. One of the, I think this is St. Stephen's Church, supposedly 15 kilograms of gold flake on those steeples. The Dnieper, even though it's spelled Dnieper, they pronounce it Dnieper River, building a new bridge across. And this is Russia, Mother Russia looking back to Moscow, and surprising it hasn't been pulled down. Again, some of the construction going on the east side of the Dnieper River, apartment buildings, a lot of construction going on over there. Some of the poor houses along the river, And that's in 2010, Ukraine and Poland held the European Cup Championships. And this is one of the stadiums that we could see from our hotel room that they played soccer in. You know what that is. Baskin Robbins, right? In Lviv, we saw a sign for a McDonald's. We never did go in. Kiev noted its area, or the 7 towns of the 7 hills, and this is the only one of the gates left from one of the original towns. Supposedly these 7 princes had each established their own town. And here we're celebrating. People, nothing was made out of wood. It was all brick or concrete or stone. And it may take them 10 years to build a house because they'd make a bit of money, dig the basement, a bit more money, pour the concrete floor, and then eventually put the windows in and things like that. So you'd see all these places there, and still using the old-fashioned side or cut hay. The crops rose, you see the long, narrow gardens. And this is Roxana, supposedly a priest's daughter that was captured by the Mongols. And she became one of the concubines for one of the Mongol, what I forget, anyway. And she was significant in having them not raid Ukraine. So apparently it's the only statue of a woman in Ukraine that's not religious. Ukrainian taxi. And they have their polluting power plants there. And this is one of the larger farms. They're bringing the cows back home, and it was all Jersey cows. Never saw a beef cat and beef cow at all, or Holsteins. And so they're bringing them home. The ice cream over there is to die for because it's all made from Jersey milk, very rich. The picture I missed here was that one of the calves, wayward, started running down. We were parked here, running down the ditch, and the young girl running after her with a cell phone in her ear. Some things don't change. And their cell phone system is very prevalent there because it's too expensive to put up poles and run telephone lines and things like that. So that's all. Here we were at a roadhouse. We went to visit. This is a Pazanka museum. They get Pazankas from all over Europe, hundreds of thousands of them, displayed in many different ways. And then where there's a museum right next door we went into, everything, they don't make a simple chest. It's always got designs on it. This would have designs on the side of it. A talent that I never certainly inherited. Again, when they stoop the hay, they would put a branch in it with cut a branch off and have some side branches so the hay wouldn't touch the bottom, so it didn't rot, so they didn't lose any more than necessary. Again, somebody always had to stay with it. If the cattle were running loose, it was usually grandma or the wife had to stay with the cattle all day while they grazed and then bring them home. We're at the bottom end of the Carpathian Mountains. And again, all the fences around the houses, nothing made out of wood, was always brick or steel. And saying goodbye at Kiev. So again, you want to contact families. I actually went through the Ukrainian consulate in Toronto 3 years ago, and I still haven't heard from them. I'm trying to see if I can get some records from grandma's family, but nothing. So, thank you.
Anybody have any questions? Got a few questions.
Yes.
Speak really loud.
Oh, well, my question is, your family came to Saskatchewan before World War I.
Right.
How were they not gathered up during World War I?
Lucky.
Just like,
I would think so. They were in the southwest corner of Saskatchewan, and because I know people from Quebec and people out from Alberta were gathered up and sent to these sort of like mini concentration camps.
yeah. Well,
But
they
they never, I say it probably lucked.
yeah, and you mentioned the Canada part in the town. That were these people that were interned during the war that went back to the Ukraine, or were they just people that?
There might have been both. I don't know. I just know that it's all they said, that they were Ukrainians that had come to Canada and then went back and were living in Turnbull.
Yeah, I was surprised when you were going through your talk that, I mean, they were there right at the right time to be taken up in
Right.
the 1914-18 War Measures Act.
Yeah, my grandfather would have, but again, farmers were exempt from a lot of that. So if you were farming, and also he was mining coal, and two commodities they needed.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
relating to one person always has to look after the cattle.
Yeah.
Going back in my family records, by the name of Steve's, they came from Germany, okay? The only time his name ever shows up in records, he got pulled into court. He fell asleep looking after the cattle, and they pulled him into court and fined him. That's the only time his name showed up in records, searching all around the area. And that's back about 1694, something like that.
Well, that's right, the cattle go in and get into somebody else's, in the backyard or something like that, and, yeah, you never know where you're gonna find records. Any other questions?
It's not doing the record or asking a question, but I noticed that like this trouble that's just been happening in Ukraine.
Yeah.
What a shame, because that's really beautiful compared to 2001 when I was there. Yeah, really came. The building and the homes and looking much nicer.
I'm going to Czech Republic and Germany and France in September with a couple of cousins of mine. Some of you may know Frances Eagleson, she passed away recently. Two of her sisters, where we have a common ancestor. And some of their other side of the family were Germans from France, that Alsace region, which was back and forth. And they went over by Odessa on the steppe there. And then eventually came to North America in Saskatchewan. And they were going to go over just when they took over Crimea, they were supposed to go there, but they got as far as Germany and they wouldn't let them go. It was too dangerous. Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Great, thanks, Wayne. Thank you very much on behalf of the branch.
Thank
It
you.
was a great
Yeah.
presentation.
I'm gonna ask one more, Judy, before we take break. Would you